Brent Key era officially begins in Atlanta as Georgia Tech tries to recover from the disastrous Jeff Collins era. And after going 4-4 as interim last year, Key actually carries some momentum into 2023, brings some excitement back to this Georgia Tech football program as he's looking to lead the Yellow Jackets to their first bowl game since 2018. So welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, guys. We're so glad that you could join us today, ready to break down everything you know about the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. As always, please continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos. Of course, check out everything down in the description below, including our expert picks over on our website, thegridironexpert.com. Some of the best college football and NFL spread picks in the entire country over there, beating out over 80% of the national handicappers each of the last 5 years. So if you want guaranteed winning season, if you want a guaranteed profit, if you want some of the best customer service that any handicapper is going to give you, this is the place for you. We promise you will not regret it. We promise you will win big. Go sign up today for that full year-long subscription. Also, check out our Patreon account for exclusive college football content there year-round, including our Patreon Wall of Fame. And send us some gear. We'd love to get some Yellow Jacket gear in our background here, whoever your team may be. Send us some gear to the mailing address down in the description below so we can feature your team in every single Gridiron Expert video. So let's take a look at Georgia Tech, guys. I mean, the Jeff Collins era, again, as we mentioned, was an absolute disaster. They fire him mid-year. Brent Key comes in, goes 4-4 down the stretch with some big-time wins, including another massive win over North Carolina. Finished the year at 5-7, nearly made a bowl game. So the question is, can the Yellow Jackets do it this year? Well, you take a look at what they've got coming back. A lot of transfers coming in. Offensively last year, Georgia Tech was not good. Only 17.2 points per game. That's all they averaged. But again, this year, a lot of transfers coming in to try to fix that problem, starting at quarterback with Haynes King in from Texas A&M. Of course, he will battle a guy like Zach Tyron, of course, for that starting job. But King, if he can stay healthy, should get the job. Never looked really too bad at Texas A&M when he was actually playing. They add Trey Cooley in at running back from Louisville. And while they do lose their top 3 pass catchers from last year, they went out and replaced them with transfers. Christian Leary transferring in from Alabama. Dominic Blaylock transferring in from Georgia. So no love lost, right? He's going to stay in the state and go to his in-state rival. It's crazy how the transfer portal works. But big additions for Georgia Tech offensively. 4 starters back on the offensive line. So this is a team that probably should average over 20 points per game in 2023. Defensively needs some work. 7 starters are back after giving up 28.4 points per game last year. They do lose their top 3 tacklers, but should be noted that the secondary is loaded. The secondary is going to be really, really good. 3 starters back with LaMiles Brooks leading the team with 3 interceptions. He's going to be leading that secondary this year. The front 7, for me, more than anything, is the biggest concern for Georgia Tech. They allowed 189 rushing yards per game last year. They've got to find a way to stop the run. They've got to find a way to create consistent pressure on opposing quarterbacks. Secondary, I don't think will be fine. I think we'll be fine. The front 7 concerns me a little bit. But all in all, guys, Brent Key isn't inheriting a horrible situation. He did a great job last year in those final 8 games. Done a great job recruiting already going into his first year. He doesn't inherit the worst thing in the world. The worst thing that he's really up against is the schedule. Because the schedule is absolutely brutal. I mean, when you're playing Clemson and Georgia, top 5 teams right there, got to play North Carolina, got to go to Miami, got to play Ole Miss out of the SEC. I mean, it is not an easy schedule for Georgia Tech to the point where they could improve a lot, and it might not even show when it comes to the record. That's the frustrating thing, right? But you take a look what they're up against. They start off the year in Atlanta, practically a home game against Louisville, so opening up with an ACC game right off the bat. Also a battle between technically 2 new coaches, Brent Key at Georgia Tech and Jeff Brom returning to his alma mater to coach the Louisville Cardinals. But what this is for me is a battle of who wins up front. It's the battle of Georgia Tech's offensive line, which should be strong, as we mentioned, with 4 starters back, against Louisville's defensive line that had 50 sacks last year. Well, I know they lose a lot of production from that 50 sacks. They're reloading on defense. This defense is going to be really, really good under Jeff Brom this year. So who's going to win that battle? For me, it's the Louisville defense. I think Louisville beats Georgia Tech in this game. Not because of necessarily that line scrimmage battle, that's for the biggest reason, but also factor in they've got significantly better offense. You got a guy like Jack Plummer, who's experienced in playing quarterback at Purdue in California, coming in. You've got Jawar Jordan coming in at running back. And as we mentioned, the defense gave up less than 20 points per game and allowed just 330 total yards per game. So I think Louisville has what it takes to take down the Yellow Jackets as they try to work out some of their new transfers. Georgia Tech starts 0-1. They beat SC State, South Carolina State. They're 1-1. Now I think they lose their next 2 games at Ole Miss and to Wake Forest. They lost to Ole Miss 42-0 last year. Now you're going to Oxford to face a team that could be just as good, if not better. You're just not going to beat Ole Miss. And then Wake Forest, back in ACC play, it's one of those things where it's like you don't want to overlook the Demon Deacons. I think a lot of people are going to write off Dave Clawson and Wake Forest because of the loss of Sam Hartman. They lose Sam Hartman, so they're not going to be good. And that's just not the case. Mitch Griffiths is a more than capable replacement. Justice Ellison could have a big day on the ground for the Demon Deacons against this Georgia Tech rushing defense that we don't think is going to be all that improved. And the defense for Wake Forest, their strength was the secondary. The problem was the secondary last year. Their strength could be the secondary this year. Should be drastically improved. So you factor in an improving Wake Forest defense and offense. I don't think it has much of a fall off. They should take down Georgia Tech. They should be able to take down Georgia Tech. We believe that they do. So they're 1-3. They beat Bowling Green at home, a bowl team last year. Can't afford to overlook them, but they should beat Bowling Green. 2-3 and make them 2-4 before the bye week with a loss at Miami. I know they've in recent years had some success, surprisingly, against the Hurricanes. They did not last year. Fell by 21 points, 35-14. Miami now has 19 starters back, and we all know Mario Cristobal has to have a big year with the Canes, and I believe that he does. Tyler Van Dyke back at quarterback, Henry Parrish back at running back. A loaded defense this year that took a big step forward. Now it's on the road, which isn't a huge home field advantage for Miami, but it's going to be enough of one. Georgia Tech drops that game, and they're 2-4. Still no conference win. That's a concern. Luckily for them, they get their first conference win right out of the bye week against Boston College. A very, very, very winnable home game for the Yellow Jackets. The Eagles, are not going to be a bad team this year by any means. They were plagued by injuries. I think it's another thing where people are overlooking Boston College because you look at that 3-9 record and go, they won't be much better this year. But when you look at the injuries and you look at the schedule that they had, you realize that they were probably should have been a better team. Jeff Hafley had them technically bowl eligible the 2 years, I believe, prior to that. Last year, probably would have done the same had they been healthy. But this year, Georgia Tech gets them at home, fresh off a week of rest. And one thing that I'm concerned about with BC is their defense. Their defense was atrocious last year. So while they might be significantly more healthy on that side of the ball, can they improve across the board? They weren't good at stopping the pass. They weren't good at stopping the run. And I think with off this week of rest, with home field advantage, Brent Key finds a way to win this game. Just like he pulled off upsets last year, beat Pittsburgh, beat UNC, they find a way to pull off maybe a mini upset over Boston College at home to get their 3rd win of the season. Then the schedule gets tough. In those final 5 games, they play North Carolina, Clemson, Georgia every other week. It is a brutal, brutal stretch, which means right now with 3 wins on their schedule, they've got to find a way to win 3 of those final 5 games. Got to find a way to do it, and that's going to be really hard to do. North Carolina, some would say, would be a win, right? Georgia Tech has won the last 2 meetings over the Tar Heels, both as double-digit underdogs. Last year, they trailed 17-0, battled all the way back and won 21-17, which really is a testament to, sure, the offense, but the defense to slow down that UNC offensive attack, to slow them down, say, we're down 17-0, but we're not going to let you score again. That's much easier said than done, but Georgia Tech did it. It snagged the win there, and then in 2021, torched the Tar Heels 45-22. But I do think North Carolina gets revenge here. I think they finally crack the code and get over the hump against Georgia Tech. I know that the Yellow Jackets get to host this game, which is big, but Drake May is going to be even better than he was last year. One of, if not the best quarterback in the country. The defense, everybody wants to talk about how bad the defense was, and it was. But 6 of their top 7 tacklers do return. Well, I don't think the defense is going to be drastically improved. They're going to be good enough to slow down Georgia Tech, who I still think has a lot of questions offensively, especially from the quarterback position and how quickly those transfers can gel together. UNC very well could find themselves in the ACC title hunt at this point in the year, just like they did last year when they were 13th in the country and only had 1 loss. I don't think they slip up to Georgia Tech again. I don't think the Yellow Jackets can stop UNC's offense, which I think is a little bit better than last year. So North Carolina finally gets the win. Georgia Tech still at 3 wins heading into the Virginia game and the month of November. The Virginia game's tough. It's weird, right? Like, Virginia is arguably the worst team in the ACC this year, but Georgia Tech lost to them last year 16-9, and now it's on the road. So you would say, go ahead and give Virginia the win, right? I'm going to say no. I'm going to give Georgia Tech the win here. I still think, despite the new coach, despite losing last year, despite the transfers, everything like that, Georgia Tech still has more talent right now, and maybe a little more confidence, maybe not at this point in the year, but still more confidence than Virginia, who seems devoid of talent. Virginia's defense wasn't nearly as bad as people think it was last year, but the offense is downright awful. Tony Muskett maybe going to be their quarterback, transferring in from Monmouth. I mean, they don't have questions offensively. They were garbage last year offensively. I think they will be again now. So I don't think Virginia can air it out against the secondary. Their running game wasn't any good last year, and it won't be again this year. I think Georgia Tech finds a way to go on the road and get this win. Even though they lost that game, I still think that defensively they own the edge and can find a way to beat the Cavaliers, who only average 17 points per game. So give me Georgia Tech in a win over Virginia. Brent Key has shown he can win some games. Maybe he shouldn't. I wouldn't say this is necessarily one of them, but he can show he can win on the road as well. Gets a win over the Cavaliers, which means they've got to win 2 of their final 3 games to go bowling, and that's just not going to happen because they're not going to beat Clemson in Death Valley. Fell to the Tigers 41-10 last year, the season opener. You're not beating Clemson. I don't think they beat Syracuse. It's a winnable game, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. But I still don't think Syracuse offensively is going to struggle that much against Georgia Tech's defense. I think the dual threat capability of Garrett Schrader is something that the Yellow Jackets struggle to stop. I think Rhonda Gadsden is a tough target for them to cover and to stop. And that Syracuse defense wasn't all that bad last year. Secondary is going to take a bit of a step back, but still only give 185 passing yards per game. Biggest thing for Georgia Tech is if you want to win this game, you got to find a way to move the ball consistently offensively, and you've got to find a way to run the ball against that Syracuse rushing defense, which wasn't all that great. But the bottom line is Syracuse, in all aspects of the game, is better than Georgia Tech. I just don't see the Yellow Jackets getting over the hump. And then, of course, they're not going to beat Georgia. They have 2 wins over the Bulldogs since 2009. They lost 37-14 last year. They're just not beating the back-to-back national champions. It's just not in the cards. So with that, guys, we do have Georgia Tech finishing the year at 4-8 in the first full year under Brent Key. And I know what you're thinking. How can we go 5-7 last year but take a step back to 4-8 this year? Again, like we said, it's not because the talent isn't there. It's not because the coaching isn't there. I think Brent Key was the exact right hire, the perfect hire for Georgia Tech. It's because of the absolutely brutal schedule and the strength of the teams around them. They're not beating Louisville. They're not beating Ole Miss. They're not beating Miami. They're not beating Clemson or Georgia. It's just not happening. So you look at the 4 wins we give them and you say, where can they find 2 extra wins? Maybe you say they beat Syracuse. Maybe you say they beat North Carolina again, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think the most winnable games outside of the ones we mentioned are Syracuse and Wake Forest. You've got to find a way to win both of those if you want to go bowling if you're Georgia Tech. I don't think they do. Maybe you split and go 5-7 to match last year's win total. That wouldn't shock me. But I still think this team is about a year away from getting back to the postseason. But regardless, Brent Key, a phenomenal hire. Saw it in the final 8 games last year. You will see it at times this year. And next year could be the year that he finally breaks through with the Yellow Jackets. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and of course, check out everything down in the description below, including our expert picks over on our website, thegridironexpert.com, our Patreon account for exclusive college football content year-round, and send us some gear to our mailing address. Let's get some Georgia Tech gear up here, or whoever your team may be. Send us some gear to represent every single Gridiron Expert video. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.